We are live. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you're coming from. Welcome to this Wizer CTF challenge. We're going to review our first CTF. We're going to show the solution, and it's also a great opportunity for me to introduce Itzik. He's Wizer CTO,
Nice.
and he's the guy that is responsible for writing all of these challenges, which are pretty hard, at least for me. Hopefully, one day you'll make an easy one, not the zero one that is just like an actual one that I can solve. Anyways, guys, if you can hear us, see us, feel free to comment so that we know that you can that you're seeing this. Um, and that's it. Yeah, let's Itzik, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Gabi. So I'm Itzik, and I'm the CTO at Wizer, and I'm very passionate about code security and secure coding. And my background is mostly technical, build products all my life, pretty much. Entrepreneur, build companies and products. But in Wizer, I'm actually leading this effort to kind of like educate developers a little bit above and beyond the OS 10 regular check mark of I know that there is SQL injection kind of thing. Is go a little deeper, understand the different vulnerabilities, how they can become more and more complex, and that's what we're doing with the CTFs as well.
Yeah, you're doing a great job, to be honest. It's not they're not trivial. All the challenges assume that the developer did try to protect the code, and we can see that even so, it's still we're still able to break it. So let's first of all give a very brief structure of what is the CTF is. This is challenge number one, but if you can quickly just show us how it works,
Absolutely.
and for people that want to do future CTFs, so they can understand how to basically tackle this
Absolutely.
before even going and trying to solve this.
Right. So the CTF is actually, we start with deploying an actual app. So we take a short snippet. We're trying to create as realistic as possible. Sometimes it's less realistic because it's very short. We're deploying a short snippet somewhere online. Okay. And then once it's deployed, we're actually wrapping it with the CTF challenge here. So it shows the code. You can see it here. You can actually browse to the code. You get the URL. So if you go directly into the code, you'll see that that's where the code is actually. And then you can put your payload here. What the CTF shell does, it actually checks that your payload is actually doing or causing the expected result. And what is the expected result? In this case, we are trying to inject an alert Wizer. Okay. This challenge is retired, means that it doesn't collect points for your master leaderboard that is on the bottom. But it still allows you to go ahead and play, so you can still play. Very soon, what we're going to do is we're also going to release here a link to a write-up that explains the challenge and actually gives the opportunity for someone to learn what to do in order to protect themselves from such thing and how to crack it. Okay.
So basically, you can either use this text box to run your payload, or you can open it in a separate window, and you can use Burp Suite or any other tools you want. So you don't have to use this, but it's convenient for some, and this is the only way to see if you got your flag. So if you were able to break this code, you will be displayed with a flag, and you'll have the option to enter into the leaderboard. Which, if you scroll down, we can. So this is from about a month ago. So we can see there were quite a few that were actually able to solve this. Yeah, I think like 60, which is actually
Or
pretty.
wait, can't remember how many. You're right. Probably here 68.
68. Yeah, that's impressive. So this was, I would call it a medium level, right?
Yeah,
Um,
even low medium.
two peppers if we go up.
Yeah, two peppers.
Okay. So let's review the code. First of all, let's see what the code is supposed to do, and
Mhm.
then explain sort of what did you see people try to do in order to break it before showing the solution. So what was the mindset? First of all, what was the mindset of the developer that
Yep.
wrote this?
Yep.
How did they try to protect it? And what did people attempt to do in order to break in?
Right. So that's a very simple code. You can find this code in many, many types of apps where you're sending an argument. An argument is a URL or the source for the image. Pretty plain, doesn't sound harmful, but the issue is, the developer already knew that there is a risk here, right? The URL can be manipulated by a user. So what they've done is they actually use the DOM purify to try to sanitize the image parameter that arrived on the URL. But in this case, it wasn't enough, and we'll explain exactly why. But the mindset of the developer is I'm protecting my user input by sanitizing, by using DOM purify to sanitize the parameter, and then I'm planting it under the source. If I run a few tests, if I try to close tags or do things that are obvious on XSS, it will block me. Okay, so that's the mindset of the coder.
So we got here basically somebody that wrote a piece of code. They did sanitize the input like it's advised. So they may have, they're aware of the risk. They used DOM Purifier, which is a library that was meant for this. And when people tried to break into this code, they figured out that probably DOM Purifier is the place where they need to break it, and they were trying to close tags and stuff like that. They were trying to basically can you give an example of some of this things?
Let me explain. So for example, this was a very common kind of like something of this sort. Let me go to the box here. Something of this sort was very common. People try to say, okay, let's try to just close the image tag and inject a script. That would be the standard way to do XSS, is like, try to eliminate the tag that we're working on right now, which is the image, and then open another script tag and actually inject that here. That won't work, and I can use that. Why wouldn't it work? Because the DOM Purify catches it. The DOM Purify won't let you open and close tags. It will only let you do things within the image property that you are injecting right now. So what would happen is actually to, within the properties of the image, actually insert things that are valid from a DOM Purify perspective, because there are no DOM elements. No DOM elements are closed, new DOM elements are open, and etc. And that would be something like that. Let me show you. So a typical solution would look like this, is within the image URL, what I'm doing is I'm giving it a wrong URL that will throw an error, and then open the attribute within the same tag. So I'm not opening and closing tags. Within the same attribute, use the onError very valid attribute to insert an alert. This, on the other hand, will definitely cause the Wizer alert here, right? Which is exactly what we wanted to achieve. And so here, I won't get into the leaderboard in this case, but that's exactly what
we didn't see the alert, I guess, because of the way the screen is shared. But basically, an alert popped up, and so this is smart. This is basically what it's doing. It's two things, right? One, because you're using the value of the parameter and not the actual user input. It's part of the user input, but it's the value of the tag, right? You're using that. And because you didn't check the entire element, you checked only part of the element.
Exactly.
So that's one way where you were able to bypass this DOM Purifier. However, the onError is what allowed you to run an XSS.
Yes.
So basically, we're using we're triggering an error in order to create an XSS, which is smart.
Yep, exactly. So the idea here is what the developer missed when they wrote this, okay, is that it's not enough to sanitize the input. So DOM Purify is a great library, and I do highly recommend using it. However, the problem is with using only it or using it incorrectly is that you might not capture enough. So there's a nice article here that I found that actually explains that very well. And here's an example of how it should actually work. So from a developer perspective, if you are doing something like that, instead of just sanitizing the user input, sanitize the entire tag or set of tags. Once you sanitize the entire tags, dom purify has the context of the tag. You won't be able to close and open tags, but that you couldn't do even before. But even something like that, using the on error approach, would be sanitized properly, because the dom purifies actually sees the tag and remove that malicious, potentially malicious code that you're trying to inject.
So basically, we need to sanitize not only the user input, but the entire HTML element
Exactly.
that that we want to basically display.
Exactly. Exactly. And
Got it.
so
Which
I
also means, if I'm correct, this has to be to do with also output, not only input, because we're using that on air.
absolutely, absolutely. So we are one of the ideas here is to check the output, not only the input, because the output is larger scope and can let the library actually identify the malicious code that is getting in there.
Yeah.
Okay?
Do you think? I'm just curious. Do you think any of the like scanners out there that are looking at code, is this the type of vulnerabilities where that they can detect, or this is more a logical?
No, no, I do believe that smart, even static code analyzer could potentially identify, probably not the simple ones, but the better ones, because there are signs that this is happening here, but it takes a little bit more digging. I think, however, developers should always be, and that's where I think this is important. We're publishing this. This is going to be available on the challenge itself. There's going to be a link to this. So here you'll see the goal, the description of the code, what we just talked about, what's wrong with that approach, what would a successful attack look like, what we talked about. And then the so what is important. We'll talk about it in a second. But the main takeaways, one of the things that I wanted to emphasize is it's not enough to use a library. Okay, this second one. It's great to use third-party libraries. It's highly recommended as long as you do it responsibly. Responsibly. But what is doing it responsibly means it means that you understand the scope of the library. What does it do? What are the best practices? You read a little bit about it. You don't need to understand the code. You don't need to analyze the code and be able to write the library on your own, because it's well tested and already working. But you need to understand what the library does and how it does it, so that when you use it properly and correctly. And there are a ton of samples in the internet, on the web, to browse and look at different best practices.
So if you go back to the code for a second, just to clarify how you would have solved it. So if you were to take this DOM purifier and sanitize instead of the image param, instead of that, drop that down a line under the image and sanitize the image,
Yep,
this wouldn't have happened.
exactly,
So it's
exactly.
as simple as that. It's as simple as changing the order and sanitizing the output versus the
Yep,
input. The input.
exactly,
You could
exactly.
potentially do both. You can potentially sanitize the input and the output, but the output is equally important. It's not only about user input.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, Gabby, and I think it's really important, we're not trying to say that developers don't think about it. Many developers do think about, security and how do they protect their code and so forth. The problem is that sometimes you just don't know, we're not noticing the best way to use those things. And with that, I used the right library and I actually thought about the right things, but I made a mistake in the way I used it. And that's what screwed the security of my code.
Gotcha. Okay, let's talk a little bit about impact, because something as simple
Yep.
as that, as sanitizing the image param versus sanitizing the image,
Mhm.
can be devastating. It can be.
Exactly.
So let's talk a
Exactly.
little bit about what can you do with XSS.
Right. So,
It's
so
much more than alert. Alert is just for us a way to prove that you broke the code. But if something like that happens in real life, and unfortunately it happens too often,
yep.
yeah, talk to me about what can you do with XSS.
Yes.
It's
So
endless, but let's give a few
XSS itself,
examples.
you're right. As you mentioned, the XSS itself only injects a JavaScript code. How harmful that could that be? And we're thinking about, okay, so you launched an alert. So what? Okay. not a big deal. However, XSS, as also many other vulnerabilities, are not standalone. Okay, sometimes in and of itself, it's not that harmful, but being able to get into the context of the app. If it's a logged in user, it has cookies. If it's a logged in user, it's available. It's some APIs are available to it. You can perform actions on behalf of the user, okay, which can be very harmful. But that's not enough. Like if someone wants to actually take over a system, what they would do is they use XSS. Now they're in the context of some user, but then they will try to find IDORs like broken access controls, weak ciphers, and etc to get in even deeper and maybe take over an admin account, which is way more effective if they want to take over and so forth. So we have to remember that those simple things that give us an entry point are not necessarily the end of it, right? Because you can say, okay, it's not, the impact is not big, but it can be super harmful because once you're in, a whole host of new opportunities open up for you, right?
Yeah, so I'll give an example, guys. Like, if, for example, you craft that payload into a URL. So with social engineering, if you were to send that link to someone and the only thing they do is click on it, just click, you can potentially hijack their session. You can take over their account just by clicking on a link.
Mm-hmm.
That's just, again, depends on some other stuff, but this is something that it can be by publishing that link on a comment on social media. It can be a blog post with a link. It can be an email with a link. But a site that has XSS and is not well protected, a link may be enough to basically hijack people's credentials because they have an active session. You take their session, you send it to yourself, and now you can log in as them and you can do other stuff. This is just one example. So the impact can be huge. And without having, so people think about phishing usually as, will somehow trick them to give us their username and password. But if the site has an XSS, the victim just needs to click on a link.
Right.
That's it. So that's how big of an issue is XSS, and many security controls, the SOC team, and all of those monitoring, they don't have access to this type of stuff. They don't know that there's an XSS vulnerability and somebody's taking advantage of this because it's external, right? It's not internal. You're basically hijacking the cookies from the victim's account. You don't even need to break into the database. You're just stealing the information from the victim's machine. So they won't even know about it. And potentially you can now send that, like I said, you can post it on social media, that link. Anybody that clicks on it, you're starting to harvest their credentials. Mm-hmm. So this is just, again, depending on a few other things, but this is sort of the impact of something like this. Let's so this is great. Can you show once again for people what the actual payload looks like, just to summarize this, and then
Yep. So in this case, the payload of like the image URL actually prematurely closes the URL, but also puts a wrong URL. Test is definitely not going to work. And then after a space, you can encode it, obviously, %20 or something like that. Then error equals, and within the error, you put whatever script you want. Right?
So highlight the alert. So instead of alert, here is basically where you put your bad stuff, right? So when it comes to like creating a payload that is impactful, instead of alert, it will be something like document dot, I don't remember, how it goes, document dot cookie, whatever. But this is where you sort of like start to write. This is just a proof of concept that if alert works, then anything else I'll write will work. And thinking that a WAF can save you for, against this type stuff, I wouldn't count on it. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't, but there's endless amount of options, concatenating strings and doing different stuff to basically overcome application firewall. So it's better to just code correctly from the get-go. Mm-hmm. So let's review. So we have an active challenge going on. By the way, in 2 weeks' time, when we do this again, we're retiring. So we have 6 active challenges, and the seventh is retired. In 2 weeks, when we publish the new one, we will retire CTF number 2, and we will do the same thing, and we will review this. But we have a CTF that we launched yesterday. Obviously, we don't want to reveal the solution, but maybe for the people that are here, you can sort of give, I don't know if a hint, but a direction. Let's
Yeah,
call it that way.
yeah, yeah,
Or
absolutely,
what went in your head when you basically
absolutely,
wrote this?
right, absolutely. So again, maybe not exactly a real world scenario, because again, we're trying to shrink down the snippets to be very short and focus on vulnerability. In this case, I won't reveal which ones, but there are two very obvious vulnerability. One is obvious from just reading the code. The other is actually as well, because you can read the code and you can understand which libraries we're using. And the idea is that one vulnerability won't be enough to actually hack into what the challenge is asking you to do. Is you need to log in as an admin. And it's not enough, by the way, people tried to make Isaac, the person here that I'm giving the password for, I noticed people try to make Isaac an admin. You won't be able to make Isaac an admin, and tricking the UI to say that as Isaac an admin is not enough. Why is it not enough? Because the server doesn't treat Isaac as an admin. It won't let Isaac do any admin things. So there's this login page, okay? Very simple login page with the API that I published the code for. And the way to use it is just log in as Isaac with the password that I've given you. And what it's going to do, it's just going to tell me, hey, you're logged in as as Isaac as a user. Okay. So that's great. That's all we need. So we're not doing more than that. However, in here with the API payload, what we're trying to do is log in as an admin. So the hint that I'm going to give you, you have to first find out who's the admin, and you have to figure out how to log in on their behalf. Okay. So that's all I'm going to give you right now. But the direction is take a look at how we pull, the information from the database, see if you can intervene there, and figure out a way then to identify how to use the password.
Cool. And how spicy is this challenge? This is a
That's
3.
three. That's a 3. Yeah, that's a 3. And again, I think it's not extremely difficult. We might publish in the future 4s and 5s even. Right now, the 3s are sufficient level to get confused and tricked, right? But are still very possible and very doable. So that's the 3.
And I can tell you guys that I don't know what takes longer to write to think about the challenge, forget about writing it, to think about the challenge or to solve it. So, kudos to you, Itzik, for coming up with this. This is really not easy. We're talking a lot about those things, and
it's a lot of fun, though, Gabby. It's a lot of fun. I'm really having fun doing it. And the nice thing is I'm trying to shrink the code snippets. And sometimes I'm doing things that are not very realistic. But in this case, again, I was trying to insert areas of, oh yeah, I definitely thought there will be a vulnerability here. That's how I protected it. But again, I didn't protect it enough. And there is still a crack that people could get in. So
cool, guys. And if you have ideas for challenges, DM Itzik. He would love that. There's always, new ideas. So he would love to hear from you guys. And I think that's it for now. Until next time, Itzik, thank you very much. I love
thank
these
you.
challenges. They are fun. I'm trying to solve some of them. Even it's crazy because even though I sort of know the idea behind the challenge, and I just can't. They're tricky. Some of them are like really, really tricky. But it just comes to show how important it is to learn to code secure. We've been seeing developers try to solve this, and people that have years and years of experience, but it's a different mindset. It's one thing learning to build something. It's a different thing about learning how to break something. So yeah, enjoy this challenge, number 7, and we'll meet you next time. And if you have, again, anything that you want to, if you need hints or anything, you can comment, you can DM Itzik, you can DM me. I'm not sure that I will be able to help you with this ones. But again, thank you very much, guys. And thank you, Itzik, for doing this. And
Thank
see
you,
you
Gabby.
later. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye bye.